Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're digging into a book that really shook things up in personal finance, Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Oh yeah, that one definitely made waves. Still does, actually.
Totally. It sets up this, really stark contrast. You've got his actual dad, the poor dad, who's kind of the voice of traditional advice.
Go to school, get the safe job, that sort of thing.
Exactly. And then there's his best friend's dad, the rich dad, who has this completely different, almost radical entrepreneurial view on money and, well, life, really.
Two totally different worlds, different mindsets about how wealth works.
Right. So our plan for this deep dive is basically to unpack what the book's really saying, look at, what makes it strong, but also touch on some of the criticisms you hear.
Give you a good rounded picture of why it's had such a lasting impact.
Okay, so let's jump in. What's the core idea Kiyosaki really hammers home?
Well, what's really key, I think, isn't just get rich. It's that financial literacy, really understanding money, is what builds wealth. More so, he argues, than just good grades or a fancy degree. He kind of suggests the usual school system almost trains us wrong about money. Makes us good employees, maybe, but not necessarily financially free thinkers or, entrepreneurs.
That's a pretty fundamental challenge, isn't it? So the poor dad says, good job, save money, climb the ladder. But the rich dad perspective is more like,
is that job actually making you wealthy or just paying the bills? It's about acquiring assets, understanding cash flow.
making money work for you.
Exactly. Rather than you always having to work for money. That's the big shift.
And his definitions are crucial here, right? Asset versus liability.
Oh, absolutely. For Kiyosaki, it's super simple, maybe too simple for some accountants, but basically an asset puts money in your pocket, period.
And a liability.
Takes money out of your pocket. Simple as that.
Okay, so let's take the classic example, your own home. Most people think, biggest asset I own.
Right. Conventional wisdom.
But Kiyosaki's rich dad would say, what? If you're paying the mortgage, taxes, upkeep, and it's not generating rent.
Then it's actually a liability. It's constantly taking money out. It's all about cash flow for him. Does it feed you cash or does it eat your cash?
That's a powerful reframe. It really forces you to look at things purely based on whether they generate income now.
Precisely. Focus on buying things that produce income, rental properties, businesses, stocks that pay dividends, assets in his definition. That's the core strategy.
And you can see why this book hits home for so many people, especially if they're just starting to think about money differently. What do you see as its biggest strengths?
I think its real power is sparking that aha moment. It takes potentially complex financial ideas and makes them feel really accessible, often using those simple stories and anecdotes.
Yeah, the storytelling helps.
It's maybe less of a step-by-step manual and more of a mindset shifter.
Yeah.
It genuinely motivates people to question their ingrained habits around money.
But it's not without its critics, right? Where do the main criticisms tend to land?
Yeah, definitely. While it's hugely motivational, a common point is that the advice can feel, overly simplified. It's heavy on the why and the anecdotes, but sometimes light on the practical, okay, what do I do Monday morning? Steps.
Right, it paints the picture but doesn't always give you the detailed map.
Exactly. And those definitions we talked about, asset, liability.
They don't quite line up with standard accounting, do they?
Not strictly, no. An accountant looks at a balance sheet differently. Kiyosaki's definitions are functional for his philosophy, prioritizing immediate cash flow over net worth in the traditional sense. You just need to understand the framework he's using.
Okay, so summing it up, despite maybe being a bit simplistic or unconventional in places, Rich Dad, Poor Dad still holds up as a really potent starting point for financial literacy, especially if you're looking for that big shift in thinking about wealth.
Absolutely. I think its main value, its enduring legacy, is pushing you to question those deep-seated beliefs about money we all absorb. It opens your eyes to other possibilities, other paths, and changing your mindset. That's often the biggest hurdle.
That makes sense. So thinking about how Kiyosaki challenges that conventional wisdom, maybe a final thought for you listening. What other assumptions or standard advice in your own life could maybe use a similar deep dive reevaluation, something to think about?
Good question.
Thanks for tuning in to this deep dive on Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Hope it gave you some food for thought.